How did one guy become a millionaire by age 30? Would you be willing to make the sacrifices he made to achieve his financial success? And then how did he blow his fortune and then regain it, all before the age of 40? We'll answer these questions and more on this, the 104th episode of the DoughRoller Podcast.
Welcome to the DoughRoller Podcast, where the best thing money can buy is financial freedom. We help you make more, spend less, and invest the rest. And now your host, Rob Berger.
Whether you're just starting out, buried under a mountain of debt, or well on your way to financial freedom, this is the podcast to help you take your finances to the next level. Hey, everybody, this podcast is sponsored by Betterment, the most preferred automated investing service. Betterment has cutting-edge technology to optimize returns, minimize taxes, and save you time and money. Join over 34,000 customers who have already streamlined their portfolio management at betterment.com/roller. That's betterment.com/ROLLER. So today on the show, we have another interview. We've got Alan Corey on the show. And kind of a little story behind this. You may recall, if you've been following along, I interviewed a listener named Natalie. This goes all the way back to the 87th podcast, DoughRoller.net/podcast87. Natalie, if you remember her story, she basically graduated. What she did, she graduated from college debt-free. She paid off. She had a student loan. She paid it off the day she graduated. And really inspiring story about how she, made the sacrifices that she did that enabled her to do that, and then pay cash for a car at that time, and then buy a home shortly thereafter. A great story. If you haven't listened to Podcast 87, I highly recommend it. But one of the things she mentioned in the show, I asked her what some of the personal finance books that she's read that she would recommend. One of them had an interesting title, $1 Million by 30 by Alan Corey. Well, I had never heard of that book, and so I went and I bought it, and I read it, and I liked it. And so I just, out of the blue, found Alan Corey, emailed him, and said, "Hey, Alan, you want to come on the show?" And he said, "Sure, love to." And, well, there you go. We have Alan on the show today. He's going to tell us his story. He's going to tell us how he did it. And, it's not... there's no magic here. You'll hear the story, but it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of sacrifice. And you'll hear that story. You'll hear some of the mistakes he made along the way as well and what he learned from them. So hope you enjoy the interview. Let's welcome Alan to the show. Alan, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Bob.
Hey, I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. As I mentioned to you before we started recording, another person that I interviewed had mentioned you and your book, $1 Million by 30. So I bought it and read it and thought it was a great story. And I reached out to you, and you were kind enough to come on the show. So I'm very grateful. Why don't we just start with give folks just a little bit about who you are, so they know who Alan Corey is.
Yeah, sure. Maybe I'll preface it with basically what the first book is about, and it was my journey from graduating college. I went to the University of Georgia and moved to New York as soon as I graduated. And with no money, like a lot of college kids, and was instantly surrounded by wealth everywhere in New York. I just felt like everyone was had a lot more means than I did, and so I made it my mission to try to make $1 million by 30. I made that my goal when I was age 22, and I had a $40,000 job, and I kept that job and rode it for about 6-7 years, and I was able to reach my goal, not just through my job, but taking as much as I could from that job and investing it all over the place.
Yeah.
And the investments worked out well.
Okay. Now, you said you made the goal of having $1 million by 30 at age 22. Is that also when the year you moved to New York City?
That is. Okay. Yeah. So it was. As soon as I moved to New York, I made it my goal. People come to New York to be rich and famous, or whatever their dream is, chasing their dream. And New York's a great place for that. And I decided that was going to be my dream, and that was why I'm here, and that's why I'm, my mission. I was going to do whatever I can. And I made that declaration as I was renting an illegal sublet from the housing projects in Spanish Harlem. So I was as far away from $1 million as I've ever been before.
Yeah. Well, so when you were 22 and you moved to New York City, first of all, did you have any debt at that point?
No. So I was able to. There's a great scholarship program I was able to get called the Hope Scholarship here in Georgia, and I had a job all throughout college, part-time job, so I was able to save money. I've always been a saver, so I left college with no student loans, and I'd saved $10,000 of my own money that basically I spent to move to New York and get settled in New York.
So when you hit New York, you had no debt, but you also had basically no assets to speak of.
Right, exactly.
You made a comment that you've always been a saver?
Yeah. So actually, the title of my book is $1 Million by 30: How to Overcome a Crappy Job, Stingy Parents, and a Useless Degree. And there's my stingy parents. So I think I just picked it up from my parents. They were always penny pinching. They were always looking for a deal, always saving, and I think I just, it was imprinted on me at a young age that, be really careful with your money. And so they would not ever give me money. I always had to earn my own money. So they taught me how to do that. So I was overcoming the stingy parents part.
So did you work during high school?
I did. And a lot of my friends, they would get, just money from their parents, but all my money was something I had to go. I worked dressed up as Chuck E. Cheese, as a big rat. That was my high school job, and then I was a lifeguard for a little bit as well. So that's how I made my scratch, and so I could go to movies with my friends or whatnot.
Yeah, my memory of the Chuck E. Cheese rat was when our daughter was very, very young, and we took her there, and she was scared to death of it.
Yeah, I had that effect. I'm 6'3", and so in that costume with the big ears, I couldn't fit through the doorway, so I was just towering rodent walking down the hallways. I made plenty of kids scream just from my appearance alone.
Right. Okay, so your parents, watched their money. You learned it from them. You worked in high school. You saved money. You graduated from college with no debt. Why the goal of $1 million by 30?
That's a good question. I guess that's what I thought I needed to whatever lifestyle I wanted, or the girl I wanted to get, or whatever I visioned myself like 8 years down the road when I hit 30. What do I want to be? It's just kind of what I visioned for myself, I was aimless. I didn't have a plan leading up to that, and I feel like I was just going nowhere fast. So I decided, well, why not aim for the sky? And and if it happens, that's great. But if it doesn't happen, I'm pretty sure I'll be in much better financial shape than I am now. And so I just set out and learned as much as I could about stocks and real estate and investing principles in general.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, when you were making the goal, did you think to yourself, and if I achieve this goal, if I get $1 million by 30, here's what I want to do with it, or here's how I want it to affect my life? Or was it just, that's just your goal? It gave you something to focus on, and that was pretty much as far as you thought it through?
Well, I guess if I'm completely honest, I always looked at myself as a writer first. And so in my head, I was like, that would be a pretty good book to read. And not only that, a pretty good book to write. So,
so you had the book idea from the beginning.
Yeah, I had the book idea. I was like, that would be my reward, is I'll finally be able to get the book that I want to write. I'll get a book deal, something like that. If I can achieve this, I think I have a good book in me. And so I guess, as you're asking me, it's all coming back to me, and that's probably what my true motivation was. So,
okay, and so
I really enjoy writing, so that was perfect.
Well, so people can put this in perspective. You were 22 when you moved to New York City. What year was that?
2001.
Okay, and I want to talk about the time you were in New York, but since you mentioned the book, let me just ask you this: so you moved in 2001. You're 22. You want to be a millionaire by in 8 years. When did you start writing the book?
Oh, after I became a millionaire.
Okay.
Yeah. So I didn't start writing it, but I took, I guess, mental notes along the way, like. Okay, I'm buying my apartment. I'm going to just, if you read the book, like you said, but for the listeners, like I put in every, what my finances were in every single month, what the value of my apartment is, what's in my checking account, what's in my savings account, 401k. Every chapter, it shows me, every month of my life in those 8 years, what it was. And so I kind of took those kind of mental notes of, okay, remember this would be good for a book one day maybe. But also it probably also came from a place where this is good to know, be on top of the finances is going to help me be a millionaire by 30. I got to always know like how much is in my different accounts and how, what's tracking, what's doing well, what investments are not doing well, and should I adjust, should I not? So, it's all kind of wrapped up in one where, I guess to answer your question, I didn't write the book until after I got a book deal. And I didn't get a book deal until after I became a millionaire before 30.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm just curious, how long did it take you to write the book?
About 6 months.
Okay.
It kind of just flew for me. I had this blueprint in the back of my mind for 8 years. So, and like I said, I enjoyed writing. So it was a pretty easy process for me.
Okay. So let's go back. You're 22. It's 2001. You moved to New York City. You've got your goal. Did you have any sense at that point as to how you were actually going to achieve it?
Not really. I started to, basically, at first I started with knowledge. I didn't know where to begin. And so I just started devouring investment and personal finance books. And I couldn't get enough. I'm just trying to absorb as much information as possible. And then I started reading autobiographies of rich people and biographies about rich people and try to, cull any sort of overlapping, characteristics that these people may have or any sort of principles that they use over and over again. And so I just sort of started getting the same information from every single book, and then I kind of pulled those principles and was like, made that my blueprint to making $1 million. And a lot of that is self-confidence, really believing in yourself, ability to overcome obstacles, not, one obstacle or one hiccup or something not totally derailing you. Look at it without an emotion, kind of just really analyze the numbers. Does it make sense? Is this really the end of the world? Most likely it's not. It's just a learning experience is something at least to take away from it. Even if you lose money, at least it's a learning experience. Because if it's not, you're going to lose money from it again. And just drive. It was just completely focused determination that were some of the common characteristics that I decided I needed to have.
Well, and for folks that end up reading your book, they'll see this in a lot more detail. But one of the things is you are a cheapskate, right? I mean, that's kind of a theme of your book. And just to kind of give people a sense of that, tell us about the first apartment you moved into when you moved to New York City.
Yeah, sure. So I moved to New York because obviously coming from a small college town to expensive New York, Manhattan, I couldn't afford much. And so I found the cheapest apartment I could possibly find to a friend of a friend referral, and it was an illegal sublet in a housing project in Spanish Harlem, but I was paying $400 a month, and that included all utilities and everything. And that was my first apartment. And I didn't, at the time, being as naive as I was, that I didn't realize it was the projects that I was living there. I no one in my building or anyone I ever saw spoke English. Everyone was Spanish speaking, and I just thought it was like a cool Epcot portion of New York, where this is what New York City is like, and there's helicopters overhead all the time, and you hear gunshots, and that's what I knew about New York from the movies. And I said, all right, well, this is how it is. And it took me about 9 months before I realized I was living in the housing, really kind of a bad part at the time. It's turned around now, 10 years later, but or so. But I finally realized it when none of my friends would come visit me, or come by my apartment, and I realized that maybe it was a unique situation that I was living in.
Right. And, during the time that you were in New York, what was the most you made from your day job?
I'm sorry, I missed that. What was what?
Well, yeah, when you were in New York City, you accumulated $1 million in the 8 years that you were there. During that time, how much did you make from your regular 9-to-5 job?
Yeah, so I started at $40,000 a year. That was my starting salary as a tech support line. But what I did is I actually lived off about 70% of it, possibly more. I think it was about. I lived off. Sorry, let me rephrase that. I invested that much. I lived off. I think after taxes, about 16% of that, 20% of that. So, and I invested over 50% of my take-home pay. So every single paycheck, I put away as much as possible, and I just lived off ramen noodles and the cheapest diets, and my company had snacks, and I was definitely living way, way, way below my means because with a salary that's not, it's a great salary in some places, but New York doesn't go that far. And that was my only way. I couldn't control my income. My boss controls my income, but I didn't want that to stop me from controlling my outcome. And so I had no other choice. That's the only way I could possibly increase my wealth was to invest as much of the money I was making.
Were there times when living off of, say, 20% of your income was harder than others? I mean, were there times when you felt like giving up? Like, is it really worth it? Maybe I should live off 50% of my income.
Yeah, it was always hard. It was a graduated savings, so I would start at living off 20% of my income, and that was pretty easy. And so, lower. Okay, I'm sorry. It wasn't that it was easy, but it was achievable. And then I would lower it to like 19% and then 18% and go down as low as I could. There's times definitely when I'd want to go out to a concert or to the bar or something like that with my friends, and I just had no physical means of affording to do it. A lot of 20-year-olds in New York, a lot of my friends didn't have money either, so they were completely down to doing free activities, or I'd still go out to the bar and just order water, or I'd drink a tall boy at home before I left the apartment or something like that, and would not take a cab. All my friends would take cabs. I would walk or take the bus or the subway, so I'd find a way to still do what I could, what I wanted to do. It would just be a little bit more inconvenienced by it.
Yeah.
And I always paid myself that inconvenience fee. That's the way I looked at it was, I could either pay for convenience or I could pay myself for walking an extra few blocks or, going out an hour later rather than going out right at the same time everyone else is, to save myself an hour's worth of drinking or something like that. So I tried to turn every single savings technique into a game for myself. Paid myself in my mind for all the things that were difficult.
Yeah, in the book you talk about, I think you call it the wallet blowout.
Yeah. The Bill Full blowout. Yeah, so that was easy because I'm not a budgeter. I don't like budgeting, and so like a lot of my stuff was just automatically deducted from my paycheck and things like that, going to different savings accounts and checking accounts and 401ks. And so I can only spend what's in my checking account. And then so within my checking account, what I decided to do is I would go to the ATM every Sunday morning, exact same time, pull out $100. And that's all the money I had for that entire week until the following Sunday. And so I didn't have to budget. I knew I was only going to spend $100 that week. And then I would, when I got to Saturday night, I would spend whatever the rest is in my wallet. So if I had $20 left, I would go out and spend $20 on the night, rewarding myself for staying on my budget. And then if I came to Saturday night and I had 25 cents left, I would stay inside because I wanted to stay on my budget, and I would find a way to entertain myself for 25 cents, which was usually staying at home and maybe get a piece of bubble gum or something.
Right.
And then that feels good. But that usually means I did something exciting during the week. So didn't do that. But then after I did that for a couple of weeks, $100 was easy, and so I decided to challenge myself. So I went down to $90. ATMs. Central Island, you can get $10 bills. So I got a $90 each week, $90, and did that. I was able to survive $90 a week every Sunday, and so I moved it down to $80, moved it down to $70, and then I think I got into the sweet spot was probably between $60 and $70. So I would do 60 one week and then 70 the next, and then 60 one week and then 70 the next.
Right. Well, and the other thing I like, another tactic you used that you mentioned is that you had a portion of your pay direct deposited into a bank account that was across town, and you cut up your ATM card. So you basically made it hard on yourself to spend the money.
Yeah. Day one, I went to my HR and filled out all these forms. So like 10% of my income would go to the one account, or sorry, not 10%. I'm putting on my exact numbers in the book, but it's not. I don't recall it exactly, but whatever it was, 10-15% would go to the account that was the ATM right next to my apartment, and that's all I could ever see. And then, part of it would go to a different bank account that was across town that I knew would be very difficult for me to go to. It would require quite an effort, and that I would never do it. And so I put some in that account just so it would accumulate it without me seeing it or not knowing about it. And my goal with that was I wanted to buy a piece of property one time a year. And that was, if I could buy a piece of property every single year, I felt like my goal was achievable. And so I would look at whatever, every January 1st, my New Year's ritual, walk across that town, across Manhattan, and find that bank, wait in line to get into my account number, didn't know anything, and get a balance, statement on my balance. And whatever was in that amount, I would use as my down payment for a piece of property. So whatever that amount was is basically, I looked at it was a 10% or possibly 20% down payment on any property. So that would tell me what I could afford based on what I had each year.
Yeah. Well, in the book, you talk about, of course, the real estate aspect of this. And I guess, it's a good point to turn to that. I know with your first property was basically a one-bedroom apartment, and you had to borrow money from your mom, your dad, and two friends in order to make it work. I think that was the property. Was that that property or the second property?
That was the second property.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's right.
You want the details of the second one? Yeah,
well, I guess my first question is this. That's right. It was the second property. And was it hard to ask these friends and families for a loan?
Yes and no. I would never have asked anyone for a loan if I knew I couldn't pay them back. I had 100% faith, and what I said to them when I asked them time, I showed them. I said, "Listen, I have this much in my 401k already saved up. I couldn't cash it out to buy this apartment, but I can. If you borrow me, lend me money, I'll pay you interest on it, and I'll pay you back within 2 years." And so I had complete confidence. And then whatever, if I lost my job, if something went off the rails, I couldn't do anything, I had backup plans. I had already accumulated some assets at that point where I would cash them out and pay them back.
Yeah.
So that was always my goal. I think it would have been different if I didn't have that confidence, 100% pay them back. And so that helped. And then also the numbers made sense. So I bought, as my second property, was a income producing property. So basically it was a 2-family unit where I could live in one unit and rent out the other unit. And the way that the numbers worked, I showed them that I would be making money, I'd basically being paid to live in my own house, and that I would be able to pay them back within 2 years. And actually, I was able to. I think I paid them all back within 9 months.
Right.
So it worked out well.
Well, part of the story, when you tell a story, this is an 8-year story. So when you tell a story, of course, obviously after the events have occurred, and people hear it, I think sometimes people get the sense that it was easier than it really was. Or it's hard to really sometimes feel the sacrifices that you made to achieve this. For example, you say you lived in the projects for the first year or whatever, and people can think, oh, that's probably bad. And then you move on to the story and it kind of keeps going. But no, you lived in the projects for a year, right? And as I recall, that you didn't realize it was the projects for the first 5 months, which is great. But let's start with the first property you bought. It was a one bedroom, right? And you rented out the living room.
Yeah. So it was a one bedroom apartment. It was my very first property. I had when I checked on New Year's Day, I had $10,000 in my savings account that mostly from my day job that I just funneled over automatically. I never saw it. And so at the time I said, okay, well that's either a $50,000 apartment, which doesn't exist in New York, if I put 20% down, or I could put 10% down on a $100,000 apartment, which at the time didn't exist in New York either. But I found an apartment that was listed for, I think it was 110, maybe it was like 112, something like that. And so there's one apartment. And the next cheapest one was about $140,000. And so there's a place I've never been to. It was in Brooklyn. And I just saw that. And I said, I have a chance. I just have to lowball them, get them down to $100,000. I have 10% on this apartment. And so I worked on it. I went there, called the guy every 2 days and said, hey, listen, I'm still here. I want to buy your apartment. And, and he wouldn't accept my price, and then it just sat on the market for a while. And finally we agreed to $99,600. And then, so once I moved in, obviously it was more expensive than living in Spanish Island. Instead of $400 a month, I think it became about $800 a month, or maybe some other fees, about $1,000 a month. And all of a sudden I was like, oh wait, I have my own apartment. That's great. That's goal number one. But I'm spending way more money. I've doubled my housing expenses, or more than doubled my housing expenses, and I will never be able to save enough to buy a second property unless I change something. So I took my one bedroom apartment and I just hung out the really, really heavy curtain around the living room. Being a young 20-something in New York, I never really spent a lot of time at home, and plus my apartment was out in Brooklyn. All my friends are in Manhattan. And so I only used it as a place to sleep. And so I was able to find a roommate to rent out my curtained living room and basically cut my expenses in half, and I was back down to paying what I was paying when I lived in the project. And so then that was like an aha moment. I was like, okay, well, this is great. I can do this again next year because my expenses are back to what they were the previous year, and I was able to buy an apartment, so I knew I could buy another apartment at the end of the following year.
But now that obviously requires some sacrifices. First of all, you've got someone living in your living room. Number one,
true.
You're sharing you had, I assume, just one bathroom, so you're sharing a bathroom.
Yeah. And
when you come home, you've really only got one place to go. That's the bedroom.
Yeah, it was the kitchen or the bedroom, and So.
And how long did you live in that setup?
For 1 year.
1 year.
And then I bought another place, and then I moved into that the following year. Yeah.
Well, and that's the other thing. You bought the other place, and that's where you borrowed the money from friends and family. As I recall from the book, I think you ended up converting it so that there were basically 7 units in this building, right? 7 rooms to rent.
Right. So yeah, there was 1 4-bedroom and 1 3-bedroom. It was a 2-family, 1 4 and 1 3, and I just removed a door that was divided into 2 units, and I basically made it a 7-bedroom house. And then I lived in 1 room and got 6 roommates. And the reason I did that was I could maximize. If I was renting each room, I could rent each room for about $600 to $700, which was about $2,000 more than if I rented out the units separately. And people prefer to sign just responsible for a room rather than a whole apartment and things like that. It just made sense money. Like, obviously, it was more work. I had to manage 6 tenants, and I had to live with 6 tenants rather than have any sort of separation in life.
You basically were back in a college dorm. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. It was a bit of a frat house. That's true.
But this is what I want people listening to really understand. So you move out of your first place. You rent that now to someone else, right? So you're
right.
So you're managing that property, and do you have now 2 tenants in that property?
No, yeah. Well, it was a. Yeah, actually, I did. I had 2 tenants that I was renting out, and there's two other guys, and they shared it like I was, and so I was renting that out. I'm making money on top of that,
right?
So I can rent it out for more than my mortgage payment, and then I was making money basically getting paid to live in a 7-bedroom single room occupancy that I created.
Yeah, but now you're managing the 2 tenants at the first property. You're managing 6 tenants at the new property. So that means dealing with their complaints, dealing with them not paying you on time, finding new tenants when one moves out, and one of the bedrooms, which was really an office, didn't have windows. You had a hard time renting it out, so you moved into the windowless room.
Yeah, it was basically a big closet. But I decided if I can't rent it out, I'm going to have to live there. And so that's where I put my bed and dresser, and that became my room.
Was there any time when during this? So first of all, how long did you live in that home with the 6 other tenants where you were living in a large closet?
So that became my last house, and I lived there for 10 years.
Oh my word! Okay, yeah. So was there any time, particularly in the early years when you're living with your 6 tenants in a large, and you're in a large, basically a large closet, where you felt like giving up, like this just, it's just not worth it?
No, man. It was the exact opposite. I said, hey, man, this is working. I want to do this again and do this again and do this again. So it was, I was making more money being a landlord than I was at my day job at that point. And so it was great. So it was like work, like you would have to do work. So I looked at it as like, this is my paycheck. If my boss had said, Alan, stay late and do these 5 tasks, I would have to do it. And that's kind of what I was looking at. It's like, I got to stay, spend this weekend, painting or whatever it was. And the way I looked at it was like, this is my job. I'm getting paid to do this, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
And then to clarify, when I said I did that for 10 years, I lived in that same house, but I eventually turned it back into 2 units as I got older and needed some to calm down the pace a little bit. But in the way it was set up, it was probably 5 years worth of managing 6 roommates at a time.
And then I know as we go through the story, you ended up, there was and I think it's a great way to make money, but you had a neighbor who would move into a place every 2 years, fix it up, sell it 2 years later. Of course, the gains were tax free, and right. Which I think is it's something that in the back of my mind, I think that would be a great way to go. I've never done it, but you partnered with him and he was good at fixing up houses. I take it you didn't have any real background in terms of you didn't have the skill set, at least at the time, to go renovate a home from top to bottom.
Right, yeah. I'm not a handyman by any stretch of imagination.
But he did. This is what he kind of did for a living. And so you partnered with him, and you had another investor, and you basically went out and you bought a $500,000 a building. And did you then, with your neighbor, help him renovate it from top to bottom?
Yeah, and so the way it worked out was I would be the business side of things, and he would be the muscle, I guess. He would do all the work. I mean, he had the skills, he had the connections. He already had, subcontractors he worked with before and things like that. But I had the means to find good deals. I'd already, gotten relationships with banks to get loans. And also in that first deal, I brought in a third investor because I didn't have enough money to do it all on my own. So I outsourced and got an investor to help us. And so, it was a good partnership. He was in between his 2-year period where he could sell the house tax free. So he was just sitting idle. So in those off years, we decided to kind of partner up and make things happen.
So how many buildings did you buy with your neighbor and renovate and then sell?
I think it was 2, just 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you made some big money on these properties.
Yeah, I mean, it was ridiculous, crazy. I mean, we bought one for $400,000. It was a mixed use, 2-family with a store, like a little bodega grocery store. We bought that for $400,000. We put $200,000 into it, which is so that makes it $600,000, and then we actually sold it to Barbara Corcoran, who's actually on Shark Tank, the ABC show Shark Tank, and she used to own the biggest real estate firm, Corcoran Real Estate in New York City at the time too. So we sold it to her for, was it $1.1 million. Was in this neighborhood the first property ever to sell for over $1 million. It was like on the front page of the New York Times. And that obviously changed things. That was a huge win.
What year did you sell that?
That's probably 2004. So that was kind of the height of the real estate, market, the boom, and we kind of got lucky with the timing on that. And a lot of people, basically, when they hear that, that's where they dismiss me and they say, "Well, you got lucky. That's how you get rich." And then they end the conversation and they don't follow forward. And I see that good point. I did get lucky, and I put a chapter in this book about luck. And but the way I look at it is, I was in position to get lucky. None of my friends, no one else I knew, owned a property, much less 3 at that time. I also owned a lot of stocks and 401ks, and so I potentially could have gotten really lucky in stocks and something. But if you don't invest, you can't get lucky. So I had put my neck out there. I tried. I understood the risks and I also understood the rewards. So I was in a good place to get lucky. But at the same time, most 95% of the people I knew didn't even take that step to even attempt to get lucky or even understand the benefits of investing in real estate in any market. If the numbers work, the numbers work. And so the way I do my calculations is math is worst case scenario. So I knew if I bought this property for $400,000, I put $200,000 into it, I could sell it for about $650,000. So as a year's worth of work, I would have made $50,000 split amongst 3 people, which is not great, but it's better than losing money. And that was my worst case scenario when we bought the property. But the market kind of took off. The property was way more, inflated than we thought it would be. And so we split $500,000 3 ways. And that basically allowed us to do another flip, another kind of renovation. And I didn't need an investor sort of moving forward at that point because I could be my own investor.
Yeah. Well, and the thing about luck is, you're absolutely right. You put yourself in a position to be successful. I'm a big believer in that. The harder you work, the luckier you get. If you just spent 95% of what you made, like most people do, and just worked your 9 to 5, then you're right. You wouldn't have gotten lucky. But there was a lot of hard work that got you to a place where you could take advantage of a pretty big real estate market. So you did the first big, I call it the big flip. You did another one.
Yeah.
Then you bought a bar, right? You bought a bar and a restaurant.
So actually, when I knew that Barbara Cork of Shark Tank was buying the building that we just worked on, I said that this neighborhood's going to change. And this building's going to be the epicenter of this neighborhood changing. And so I bought the bar right across the street, bar and restaurant right across the street from the building we just flipped, without telling the owner that changes are coming. That Barbara Cork was buying the building. She bought it for investment property, not to move in, but she obviously knew more about real estate than I did, and she was confirming some of the thoughts I had about the changing market and things like that. And so, so I bought the bar and restaurant across, and that was obviously another way I looked at it was diversifying a different revenue stream, something completely different besides just, 2-family properties, besides being a landlord. I was now a business owner. And, that obviously has up and downs like every bar and restaurant, but being 25 and owning a bar in New York City is also kind of fun. So it was hard managing the fun parts of it and the business parts of it as well. So it's not something I recommend to everyone. And, probably in the long run, about two years later, I sold it. And I think over the years, we had some ups and downs throughout those 2 years, and we broke even. So I think we came out basically probably better than most people who buy a bar and restaurant. So breaking even, I'll take that any day.
So what eventually put you over the $1 million mark was the advance you got for your book.
Yes, it wasn't huge. It was a substantial amount, but I got a $20,000 advance for writing the book, and that was the last $20,000 that I needed to reach my $1 million goal. So that's where the book ends. $1 million by 30. When the last chapter saying I only need $20,000. It's going to take me one more year of savings, and then out of the blue, my book proposal got accepted, and I got a $20,000 advance, and that pushed me over.
Okay, now since that, so you were about 29. You had $1 million. Now, at that point, that snapshot in time, I know you'd flipped some property at that point in time. You owned the bar, right?
Yep.
You owned the first apartment you'd ever purchased, the one where you rented out the living room.
Yeah. No, I'd sold that already.
Okay, you'd sold that. But you still own the second place you'd bought.
Yeah, I own the 7-room boarding house, and I own the bar, and those were the only 2 properties I sold. I still owned. Yeah.
Now that's the good news, but I do understand that since that time you actually hit a rough patch. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. And that leads us into the second book. It's called The Subversive Job Search. So I was just stupid. I guess I thought, okay, I'm a millionaire now. I've reached my goal. I don't know what I want to do next. Actually, I achieved it before I was 30. I actually achieved it when I was 28. So at 28, I quit my day job. Because I had $1 million mark. Actually, I called it I was egomaniac enough and narcissistic enough to throw myself a retirement party. And so I left my day job at the age of 28. The one I had, the tech support job, where I was paying $40,000. 6 years later, I was making about $65,000 through promotions and raises. But I had a retirement party for myself at age 28 at the bar that I owned. And also celebrating the book deal. And I thought that was it. I would never have to work again. And then I also decided at that time that I didn't want to landlord as much. So I took my 7-family unit I was making, 7-bedroom unit. I was making a lot of money individually. I decided I don't want to do any work, so I turned it back to a 2-family. I rented out the apartment separately, and I lived in one. And then I moved from the closet to the bigger bedroom. I was trying to upgrade my lifestyle.
That increased your expenses or decreased your income anyway.
Yeah, everything that got me to where I was going, I was reversing shifts. I was just being dumb, and so all of a sudden I had no income from my day job. All of a sudden I had reduced income from my changes to the layout of the house that I was living in, and then also absentee managing a bar and restaurant that I had no knowledge of how to run. And it was having its ups and downs, and so I have no one to blame except my dumb 28-year-old self for being an idiot. But all those things obviously have a great impact and just create my income, and everything just comes to a screeching halt, and so that led to the downfall. On top of that, obviously the real estate market crashed, and I didn't necessarily lose any money flipping the house. It wasn't like a big loss that way, but in one aspect, I did start doing a home renovation on my house. So not only did I switch the layout of the house, I ended up decided I wanted to gut renovate the whole thing, and thought it was going to be another $200,000 expense, but it ended up being about $400,000 expense.
Wow!
And so I was just a dumb mistake after dumb mistake after dumb mistake. And so at the end of it, I had a really awesome house that wasn't worth as much as I put into it because the market had crashed. And so I built my dream house, but I had no money to live in it. And I had no income because I had to kick everyone out of the house to renovate the house. And so it was just one bad mood after. I'm glad I can laugh at it now, but at the time, man, I got into I was depressed, and obviously when you're depressed, you don't make good decisions, and I was just spending money to try and make myself feel better about my depression, and obviously that just made me more depressed, and it was just a downward spiral.
So how long did you stay a millionaire before you started spending the money and heading back down in terms of your net worth?
Probably, I mean, all that started the second I turned a millionaire. So probably the next day I started spending big, and didn't take long to go from $1,000,001 to 999,000. But probably in terms of probably a year, it lasted about a year. The first 3 months, like when I was retired in quotes. Every time I say retired, I'm doing air quotes over here on the phone. But I thought it was going to be awesome. But it was the most boring thing ever because every single one of my friends worked. So 9 to 5, there's nothing for me to do. And this, I get into all these details in the Subversive Job Search, which is a follow-up book about my climb back up. And I would go out to the gym and, I'd spend 4 hours at the gym because I had nothing to do. I had no one to call, no one to hang out with. And then at the end of the day, it's a Tuesday night. I'd want to go out because I hadn't done anything. But all my friends have jobs, and they don't want to go out on a weeknight and get completely wasted or hammered or do something. So I got so bored so quickly, and that I just started spending money to entertain myself. So
what it sounds like to me is that before that time, you had this purpose, this goal that was driving you, and then once you achieved it, it was almost as if you'd kind of lost your way. You had this North Star that you were trying to reach, and then once you reached it, you were more just sort of floating adrift without a focus.
That's exactly it. I lived every decision I ever made for the past 8 years was, will this help me be a millionaire by 30? Yes or no? If it was yes, I did it. If it was no, I didn't do it. And that was like my guiding light, like you said. And once I didn't have that compass, I had nothing to judge whether a decision was good or bad. It was basically I was replaced. Will this make me happy? I think so. Let's try it. And so it was
So how far did you fall when you hit bottom? Because I know you since have turned it around, right? So when you hit bottom, whatever that is for you, what was your net worth?
Basically, at the time, I had one great asset. It was the house I had just renovated, and so that was fluctuating in price. And so, probably it was at the lowest, probably $500,000.
Okay.
This is a house I bought for $450,000 5 years earlier, and I had put $400,000 into it. So probably, it went down to $500,000.
Right.
And so, and then also I had no income. And then actually, I started taking government assistance for being unemployed.
So wait a minute, you were getting government assistance?
Yeah. And so that was definitely my lowest point. And then until I was able to get a job. So I was unemployed for about 4 months, and before I was able to get a job. And that's what the Subversive Job Search is about, my book, where I went from government assistance again, what we laughed about living in the projects before, and now, I wasn't really in that situation, and I had to climb myself out of it. And that story is how I was able to basically go from nothing to creating a six-figure career in about 3 years.
Okay. What's your new career? What do you do now? You're out of New York City, right?
Yeah, that's new. I lived in New York for 13 years. I just moved to Atlanta, my hometown, about 6 months ago. I'm a software project engineer, and so I researched six-figure careers and salaries. At the time, I had to get back on my feet. How do I do this? And found basically the shortest path that I could, and got certificates and went to get more schooling and really kind of worked the HR angle. I get into this book as well, figuring out what I needed to do to get to where I wanted to go, and I recognized those steps and followed those steps to a T to make sure I can get through the HR hurdles, get an interview for a job, and work my way up.
So you're a software engineer now?
Not an engineer, but a project manager.
Okay.
I work with engineers every day, but just making sure projects come out on time. and on budget and things like that. And it was definitely another crazy whirlwind experience going from zero to back to a millionaire now from going the career route. The first one was basically real estate related and personal finance, investing and things like that. And the second one was 100%, 9 to 5 corporate job path.
Right. Do you still own any of the real estate in New York City?
Yeah. So at the same house that I renovated, I talked about before, I still own that, and that's tripled in value now. I mean, that's market's thankfully back up. And then I actually bought the house next door before I left New York, and rented that out, and bought another piece of property with a friend of mine as well, and also bought a place in Atlanta. So I've got 4 properties now, all generating three generating income. One's my primary residence.
And then you're working your 9 to 5 job.
And I'm still working my 9 to 5
right.
job. I'm not going to retire ever again. That was the worst thing possible.
Yeah. And so you're a millionaire again.
Yeah.
Okay. And, it's interesting. It's a good lesson on the real estate because, it went down. Of course, a lot of people panic when something goes down in price. You obviously didn't sell it. And I think you said it's tripled since its low point?
Yeah. I mean, that's probably 1 point, from what I bought it for. It's probably 1.4 million now, if I wanted to sell it. But it's generating such a great cash flow for me as well. Part of the reason why I didn't sell is I needed a place to live. And I saw that, if I could hold out long enough, that it would come back. I mean, it's a nice house in a nice area. It was just going through a rough patch.
So you made your $1 million, and it seemed to be you kind of left your previous habits of not spending much money, and you started spending a lot of money, particularly on the renovation. How about today? Are you kind of back to where you were in terms of how you spend and manage your money? Let me ask it this way. Of your gross income from work, your 9 to 5 job, How much of it do you save?
Probably 100% now, more or less, because I'm in a great situation with rental income, so I try to live off my rental income, and invest 100% of my income.
So how, if I can ask you, how old are you today?
I'm 36 today, and I'm not as stingy as I used to be, but that's because I'm now married and have 2 kids who won't let me be as stingy as I was. But also, I grew up a bit. I did have a bit of financial OCD that I admitted to in the book as well. That I have a very extreme mindset, and I try to be balanced now. So I'll splurge on certain things, and then I'm also very conservative, fiscally on other things. So I try to live a balanced life because swinging from extremes to extremes was not healthy for anyone, especially me. So I'm definitely working on a more balanced approach.
Can we expect another book out of you, something like $10 million by 40? Or else, what's going to be next for Alan Corey?
That's a good question. I'm actually working to get my real estate license here in Atlanta. I love real estate. It's my passion. So I hope to get involved in real estate in some way, whether it's investing in property down here, being a property manager, flipping houses, or even just being a real estate agent. I haven't figured that out yet. But that's what I'm working on now. But in terms of books, I said this after my first book. That was the only book I had in me, and I wrote a second book. And so that's the only thing. So in my head, it's like, if there's a third book, that means that something really horrible must have happened to me. So I hope there's not a third book.
Well, in that case, I hope not too. So, okay, people know what the first book's about because we've been talking about it. The second one is called The Subversive Job Search, and I'll put links to both of these in the show notes. But just kind of give folks a synopsis. Who's that book? Who should buy and read your book, The Subversive Job Search? What will that teach folks?
Yeah, sure. Both of my books are basically beginner's guides. So a lot of times audience is for people coming right out of college who are just kind of toying the water. But the Subversive Job Search is for anyone who's looking for a job, wants to find the career that fits them, or wants to at least just maximize their paycheck. fastest way to, how to negotiate a raise, how to negotiate an interview. I found all these research studies, peer-reviewed research studies, and put them in practice, and then in the book and tell them which ones worked and which ones didn't, and how I crafted my own salary and negotiations to get me, from, I was making, after I was government assistant, my first job, I was back to making $40,000 again. So I basically started over. So the first job I got, I was back at making $40,000. In 3 years, I was able to turn that to a six-figure salary. And so anyone who's looking for either a career change, how to find their first job, maybe out of college, or if they've been laid off and they want to get back into it, either within the same career or switching careers entirely. That's what the subversive job search is about.
Right. Good. Okay. Well, hey, I appreciate your time and sharing your story. Is there anything I've missed? Any part of your story you want to share with us that maybe I didn't ask you about?
I think we covered pretty much everything in depth.
Okay.
It's been a fun ride. One thing I want to mention is financial books tend to be so boring and dull. I try so hard to make my books entertaining and easy to read. So if you're a beginner or someone who's never read a personal finance book before, I try to connect to that person and put things in the simplest terms with a funny spin. And that's my goal, to get as many people who are scared of finance to kind of pull them in slowly and say it's not as scary as you think it is. Yeah,
well, the thing I liked about your book, well, among other things, was that you were telling stories. I mean, really, your book is a story. That's got lessons, personal finance and investing lessons, weave through the whole thing. But I mean, the story makes the book very interesting. And again, the other thing that I liked about it was, you talk about the sacrifices you made, and somehow I think that gets lost in the discussions about money and investing. So many people, I think, perceive themselves as victims of whatever, the society, the big corporations, the system, and that doesn't really help you much. I mean, you didn't see yourself that way. You saw it as something that you could control, and like you said, you have complete control over what you spend, in particular. And I think that was a great lesson that was kind of really throughout the whole book.
Oh, good. Yeah, I mean. It's a lot of it is just mindset, being confident in yourself and not looking at obstacles or bone crushing, or not looking at it as it's a bunch of luck. And like you said, I mean, $1 million by 30 seems like a get-rich-quick scheme, but it was, like you said, a lot of sacrifices to get there. It wasn't just a winning lottery ticket. Yeah.
Well, great. Well, listen, Alan, I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Hey, appreciate it. Thanks so much, and thank you for having such a great podcast. I've been listening to a few episodes, and I can see the benefit that stuff I'm still learning today, but also back when I was doing my 20s adventure, this sort of information is stuff that would have really helped me.
Great. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks again.
Sure. Talk soon.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the interview. You can get the transcript of the interview as well as the show notes, including links to resources mentioned in the interview. Just go to DoughRoller.net/podcast104. As always, if you have any questions for me or for Alan, shoot me an email, dr@DoughRoller.net. If they're for Alan, I'll pass them on to him. I'm sure he'd be happy to respond. Would love to hear from you. Again, dr@DoughRoller.net. Well, there you go. Hope you have a great day. Remember, until next time, the best thing money can buy, and I mean the best thing money can buy, is financial freedom.